So Mandalorian Season 3 has officially concluded. I would have done an episodic review of each one like I did with The Last of Us, but as opposed to The Last of Us universe, I don't really feel like I had a whole lot to say about each one because I'm not that well versed in the Star Wars universe. I am a big Star Wars fan. I consider myself a big one. But when it comes to Star Wars, it's the movies, and in this case the shows, and sometimes the video games I would count as canon. I am starting to branch out a little bit into some of the animated shows like Rebels, and Clone Wars I'll be talking about hopefully one day in the next year or so. I got a lot to catch up on, guys. Just bear with me here. But yes, I am a fan. I don't know everything. I haven't read all the books. I've read some of the books, well, in parts really. One of those 5th grade, easy-to-read books like Find Me the Glove of Darth Vader or something to do with Jabba the Hutt's father, Zorba. I have no idea. In short, I am a big Star Wars fan. I've really liked the Mandalorian series. I think it's a really unique look inside this universe, and also one that's a perfect bridging of the gap, so far at least, of the original and sequel trilogies. Season 1 I thought was a solid start. Season 2 by far is the best season yet. And Season 3, while a step down, I still had a lot of fun with it, even though I think some of the ways it concluded was... We'll talk about that later. If you haven't seen any of the episodes or the recent finale, I'm going to go into certain details about the plot, so ye be warned. The overarching plot of this season is Din Djarin trying to earn his place back in Mandalore, while also helping his group of Mandalorians retake their homeworld, Mandalore, recruiting other groups and other tribes of Mandalorians along the way. While this looming threat of the Imperial Remnant is brewing across the galaxy elsewhere, which we all know will eventually become the First Order. Rick Famuyiwa, who's had his hand in various episodes beforehand, returns to direct the premiere episode as well as the last 2 of the season, while Bryce Dallas Howard and Carl Weathers directed their own respective episodes. Just to get this out of the way, I know a lot of other people are saying it, Grogu and Din being reunited should not have happened in Boba Fett. Those Book of Boba Fett episodes that included those two should have been put into this season. Not the first person to say that, but the general audience that, from what I saw at least in comment sections and various people that I talked to, after coming off of season 2 and going into this one, they had no idea what happened in between. I don't know why the creators thought that was a good idea, but we all knew that they were going to get back together anyway, so I wasn't that upset with it. I just don't think it was a smart move on anybody's part in the Book of Boba Fett to include that in that series. But now we're into Mandalorian Season 3, and I've got a few things to say about this. Good ones. And some things that I thought, come on, really? Starting with the premiere episode, The Apostate. Din is trying to earn his place back into the clan, has to go into the waters of Mandalore with the help of Bo-Katan, with Katie Sackhoff returning once again, leading into the second episode where Din goes into the water in order to reclaim his place. But Bo-Katan goes in there to save him and sees with her own eyes the legendary mythosaur. Now, what exactly is the lore behind that creature? I couldn't tell you. Anyone who's really knee-deep into the lore of Star Wars, more than likely you'll get your answer. But if anyone does know, please politely tell me. I'm not that well versed, like I said. It's nothing against the extended lore. I just am not as well up to date on it. That's all I'm saying. And eventually when Bo-Katan brings him back to the clan and he's able to earn his place back, she's also accepted into the clan, despite the skepticism of the other people in the group, including this one who I'm going to call the Montross 2.0. Montross referring to the character Montross from the Star Wars Bounty Hunter video game in 2002. I guess coming from a different clan of Mandalorian warriors, seeing the mythosaur with her own eyes, I could see how that kind of opened her eyes and made her want to be part of the Mandalorian ways again. And the armor decides, you know what? You saw something down there. You might be of some use to us. And she allows her to take off her helmet. And I was a little taken aback by that, and I thought, wait a minute. You cannot remove your helmet under any circumstances unless it's a really big exception, am I wrong? What exactly is this armorer up to? Is she having a change of heart? Or is there something else up her sleeve that we don't understand yet? Unfortunately, we don't really get any answers to that. There were some theories going around that the armorer was in cahoots with Moff Gideon and the Imperial Remnant. There were certain little visual cues that they were throwing in the second to last episode, but it never gets addressed. She joins them in the fight and carries on like nothing happened. Will that get explained in season 4? Possibly. I'm not saying you have to answer every single question right now, but at the very least, give us something to go on so we can say, okay, what's happening now? I still think that there was something there involving the armor, and maybe she does have some kind of secret agenda that we don't know about, or maybe it was just all the big giant red herring from the creators of the show. Who knows? Even though I really like Pedro Pascal as the Mandalorian, and he's still just as good in here as he is in the other shows, or other seasons, excuse me. Katie Sackhoff, I think, was the big standout here. I know the characters in the other shows. I think it's Clone Wars or Rebels. No, I think it's Clone Wars. I think she really makes a great impression here when she earns her place in helping reclaim Mandalore, taking off her helmet in certain situations to unite the different tribes of Mandalore, knowing that they don't always follow the rules to a T as some others do. I guess you could say in a way it mirrors what world religions are like. Some sections or some denominations are a lot more strict than others, and some that are a lot more laid back and tame in comparison. I would say that Din Djarin's cult, yes I said cult, is like the Jehovah's Witnesses. Whereas Bo-Katan's group, I guess you could say, is more like a non-denominational tribe of Mandalore. If that makes any sense, I guess. Sorry if you can hear that, that's a helicopter flying over my house. And like with the previous episodes, we get some little filler adventures that don't really have that much meaning to the overall plot. Like where the one kid from the Mandalorian tribe gets taken by this big winged creature, and his father, Montrose 2.0. What's his name? Paz Vizsla, okay. I might call him Montrose 2.0 just for the sake of it. Wants to go after him and save him, and they go into the nest, and once they kill it, they have to bring back the hatchlings and take care of them. Which I think was kind of generous and sweet of them on their part to take care of those little creatures, because somebody or something has to take care of them. But then the season takes a bit of a hard left turn in episode 3, The Convert, where we see in full display the operations of the New Republic. I really like seeing this stuff because we get to see just how corrupt and bureaucratic the New Republic really is. And in a way you could say it's pretty reasonable as to why the First Order came out and rose out of the ashes of the Empire anyway, because clearly the people running this new government don't know their you-know-whats from their elbows. That one New Republic pilot, Carson Teva, tries to let the one Republic officer know that something's going on Navarro, believing that somehow the Imperials are still involved. And after what happened in the previous 2 seasons, he tries to tell the hierarchy of the New Republic, the Empire's still out there. We need to pay attention to this. They just shrug it off like it's nothing. No. Empire's gone. We don't have to worry about them anymore. And anybody with a brainstem will be able to know, yeah, this is eventually going to lead to the rise of the First Order. So I think if there's any doubt in people's minds, Jon Favreau has said publicly that he wants to include aspects of both prequels and originals, and also the sequels. He wanted to show how the First Order came about. And I think it really shot down a lot of those theories and hopes and fears and desires for any of those Star Wars fans out there who were hoping and wanting the sequels to be retconned. Because this season basically said, no, that ain't happening. There's other clues to that as well, as we'll talk about in a minute. I really like seeing with our own eyes that, okay, now we're starting to see how the sequel trilogy events make sense. How are they going to contextualize how the Emperor was still alive? That remains to be seen. If they're going to show it in this series, whether it's the next season, or maybe another season after that, or somehow if they're going to include that in the Mandalorian feature film, which they've got planned somehow in the next few years, I don't know. I'm not asking for an answer chapter and verse. All I'm asking for is just enough of an explanation where me and anybody else would say,
yeah, okay, I can see that.
But in this episode, we get to see the appearance of Dr. Pershing, who appeared in the previous seasons, trying to get the midichlorian count, or the M count, as he says, from Baby Yoda, Grogu, which I guess you could say is somehow connected to resurrecting Palpatine and putting them into those snow clones that we saw a glimpse of in Season 2. He receives a pardon from the new government, but runs into a familiar face, Elia Kane. I am so bad with names. And when I saw her show up, I thought, oh boy. That's not good. And she plays it off that she's basically rehabilitated and she no longer believes in the ways of the Empire. I don't know the actress's name, but throughout her performance, there's little nuances that she gives where you can tell that, yeah, something else is going on here. Pershing wants to continue his clone research, even though this New Republic droid tells him no. But I think in a way he wants to use it for good. So with the help of Kane, he tries to resurrect it from an old Star Destroyer in a scrapyard. But then they get captured and he gets warped by some kind of a mind wipe or whatever it is exactly. I don't know. But instead of sticking up for him, Kane betrays him, which is another indication that yeah, she's still working for Moff Gideon. And we later see that towards the end of the season. The only problem I have with that episode, though, is that a huge chunk of it is focused on this section of Coruscant with the New Republic. It doesn't really cut back to the Mandalorians as much as I would have liked it to. It was way, way too drawn out. And it should have been at least maybe trimmed down to about maybe a third of the episode, maybe at the second act of that episode where we see a glimpse of it. But I get that it's needed to show exactly what went on with the New Republic and how it eventually led to its downfall. But I was getting vibes from Andor. I don't really want to go into that right now, but I might. You know what? I don't care if I'm going to get hate for this. If you want to give me crap for it, go ahead. I understand why people like Andor. I didn't care for it. I thought it was really boring. This gave me a lot of flashbacks to it, although I think it's considerably better than Andor, just my personal thing. Again, if people like it, that's totally fine, but I found myself tapping my foot waiting for it to cut back to Din Djarin. As far as some other episodes like The Pirate, where we see people on Navarro fighting back against this group of pirates that take over the town, I instantly was waiting for the moment where we get to see a variation of the Pirates of the Caribbean theme song in a John Williams-esque type of style. The one Ugnaught who had the bandana on his head, I mean, come on. That was pretty obvious. And when it came to the action, that action sequence, I thought, okay, that's not too bad. It's not nearly as exciting as some of the action scenes that we saw in the previous season, but still, I think when it comes to the scope of the show, which I think is continuing to prove that television can be just as legitimate as feature film entertainment when it comes to action sequences. Television and streaming has come a long way, and The Mandalorian is another prime example that continues to prove that. Probably my favorite action sequence in this season has to be the one between Din Djarin and the Praetorian Guards, who we saw in Star Wars The Last Jedi, when Kylo Ren and Rey fight against them after Snoke is killed. The moment they stepped out in their red costumes, I thought, oh my god. Another indication that the sequel trilogy is canon. I promise I'm not going to try to keep bringing that up, but I really was looking forward to sticking it to the crowd of people out there who want to see the sequels retconned. Like it or not, they're not going away. And also getting to see Grogu flipping around on a ceiling railing, trying to avoid those guards, and fighting Moff Gideon at the climax. As a Star Wars fan in general, as someone who's really into action scenes, yeah, I really enjoyed that. When it comes to the one episode, Guns for Hire, directed by Bryce Dallas Howard, just a little sidebar here, I think she should be in charge of a Star Wars movie in the future. I liked what J.J. Abrams brought to the table with Force Awakens and, to a certain point, Rise of Skywalker. And I think Rian Johnson had an interesting vision for Last Jedi despite some of my issues with it. But I think Bryce Dallas Howard, since her father is good friends with George Lucas and he had a hand in the Solo movie, and she directed a couple episodes beforehand in the show, why not give her the task of directing a feature film? She clearly has a respect and love and appreciation for the source material. Why not? But this episode led to a good chunk of controversy with the fans. A lot of people were calling it woke propaganda with the inclusion of certain people of different skin colors. Just like I predicted, a lot of fans started turning on the show and calling it pure garbage. Not just for those reasons, but with the connections to the sequel trilogy, which I predicted a long time ago. I mean, knowing how the Star Wars fandom is, that doesn't surprise me. With special appearances from Christopher Lloyd, which was a really interesting and strange choice, but he has a very zany wackiness to him that I think fits the overall tone of Star Wars, because this universe is filled with characters that are very similar to him, and I thought that his inclusion of creating this droid rebellion was actually kind of interesting. He was kind of like the last person that anybody would consider to be behind the secret droid rebellion. It's always that one person that you would never think twice about. Then we have the inclusion of Jack Black, who, again, has a tendency and knack for being really zany and bizarre, with a really long beard, almost like an aristocrat. Hey, you know what? Jack Black, I'm a little iffy on him personally, but I thought he was really fun in this episode. And I like how we get to see different people, whether it's behind the camera or in front of the camera, dipping their toe into this universe, even if it's just for a brief second. That's something that I think anybody who has at least a mild interest in this universe, similar to Marvel, would jump at the chance to do it. If I get an opportunity to guest star in a Mandalorian episode, or maybe as an extra in one of the upcoming movies, particularly the one that's about Rey set 15 years later, because I want to meet Daisy Ridley. Please, God, please let that happen. Please make that happen. But then we also get to see the famous rap singer, Lizzo. A lot of people were not happy about that, and they thought it was way too distracting and it took them out of the show. I have to admit, I wasn't really crazy about her inclusion at first. Inevitably, though, I was able to put it to rest. I don't think she really needed to be in the show, but I also don't think it hurt the series either. It's like Macy Gray's brief appearance in the original Spider-Man movie. That doesn't bother me. So, what exactly is the problem? I also like that we get to see in that episode how the droids feel like they're looked down upon. Plays into the line that we heard in the original where, "We don't serve their kind here, you're droids." Which at the time, I guess, was a commentary on 1970s technology, or AI specifically. Thought it was a nice little expansion on that idea. And we also saw that in the Han Solo movie with L3. As for the final two episodes, The Spies and The Return, this is the big climactic moment where the Mandalorians get to retake their homeworld, but then the Imperial Remnant gets wind of what they're doing, thinking that what they're about to do by rebuilding the Empire from the ashes, they see the Mandalorians as a threat to their plan, so they send their own stormtroopers with jetpacks that look very reminiscent of the stormtroopers' design in the sequel trilogy to wipe them all out. Din Djarin gets captured by Moff Gideon, who's in his own Mandalorian type of armor, which I thought was incredible to look at and very scary in all the right ways, with the spikes around his helmet. Giancarlo Esposito just chews up in all the right ways every scene that he's in. We also get to see him meeting with the Imperial Council through the holograms and the one character, Brendel Hux, who will later be the father of General Armitage Hux in the sequel trilogy. I guess these are the founding fathers and mothers of the First Order, creating this Project Necromancer, which I guess when you translate it into its original meaning, it's awakening the dead or something. I'm not entirely sure if that's the correct way. New Rockstars has talked about that in some of their recent videos, and that's a pretty big indicator that they are planning something with the Emperor behind the scenes by rising him from the dead, basically. Maybe we'll get to see in the next season a glimpse of Snoke. Maybe Andy Serkis's character in Andor will become Snoke. Who the hell knows? I don't think that's going to happen, but hey, anything's possible. And it looks like everything's about to go south, and then in the next episode, he manages to free himself, and Grogu, who's taken over the droid of IG-11 with the no, yes, this is not working for me, kid. I gotta say, for a while up until now, it seemed like the creators just didn't really know what to do with Grogu. It almost seems like he was just kind of there, just being cute and all that, which is not a bad thing. I love that little guy, although I think the phenomenon around him has really outstayed its welcome by now. This final episode, he had a legitimate reason to be there, that he wasn't just there to just stand around and just go, He actually took part in the battle by saving Din and using that force shield to protect Bo and Din from the fireball of an explosion from that ship destroying the Imperial base. He may not be a Jedi anymore, but I guess all that training with Luke wasn't for nothing. And I also really like that Moff Gideon does end up dying after his big encounter with Bo and Din, because if somehow they did a fake out with him, I would have said, okay, this is getting old. But he got enveloped by a ball of flame, so odds are he's dead. And then Mando decides to work with Carson Teva as a independent contractor for the New Republic on a case-by-case basis. And I think that's going to be another gateway in for us to see just how exactly the First Order is going to rise. Maybe he'll see a glimpse of it and try to warn the New Republic, considering that the Imperial Remnant is still out there and he's had encounters with them in the previous 2 seasons, and there's a mutual respect between these two. So why not create some kind of an alliance? And there's also a few cameos in that particular setting. We get to see Dave Filoni with his traditional cowboy hat, Zeb Aurelios from the Rebel series. Not the first time that a character from the Star Wars animation has been included in live action, like Ahsoka and maybe a couple others that I'm forgetting. Future Joe here. I completely forgot to mention how we get to see a flashback of Grogu being rescued by a Jedi Knight during the sequence of Order 66, and the actor who plays him is Ahmed Best, who was known as Jar Jar in the prequel trilogy. Considering the amount of backlash that this guy's had to face since The Phantom Menace came out, this I think was a really awesome chance of redemption for him. But there's a few things that I think they should have cleared up. The Mythosaur was teased earlier in the season, and we see a glimpse of it again when Grogu is able to sense it in the water. I was hoping that we get to see it help out somehow in the climactic battle against the Imperials, but it never shows up in that capacity. And what exactly is going on with the armor? Is there some kind of secret agenda that she's got up her sleeve, or was that just to screw with us? In Carson Teva's discovery of the Imperial shuttle, which Moff Gideon was being transported on to go to trial, he sees a piece of shrapnel that indicates that Mandalorians broke him out of there. And when Mando shows up, he acts like none of that ever happened. What exactly led you to not come to that conclusion? There's probably a few other things that I'm forgetting. Some of the ways it brushes those things under the ground felt very, very sloppy. And I think that it could have benefited from at least one more episode addressing some of those questions. But overall, I think Season 3 was pretty solid. I didn't really have that many big issues with it. There was going to be people who are not going to like everything that happens in the show going forward. And there's some other people who are saying that it's not feeling the same anymore like it did before. They wish it was more standalone like in the first season and not having all these connections with these other characters. But this is Star Wars we're talking about. There's going to be connective tissue in some capacity. It's going to connect and mention some of those other things. If you don't like that, don't bother with it then. To want every single thing to be standalone and not connected at all, then it doesn't feel like Star Wars anymore. But it's once again another example that the Star Wars fan base has no clue what it wants from the franchise anymore. And like I predicted earlier on, The Mandalorian was going to get crapped on by the fandom for some stupid reason. Will I get hate for saying that stuff? Probably. But to be honest, I don't really care anymore. I'm going to try not to talk about it all the time, and I'm certainly not going to become a Star Wars channel. That's not what I have in mind. But I'm not going to be as afraid to talk about Star Wars like I have been for the past couple of years. Now that we've had some time to space ourselves from the sequel trilogy, maybe it wouldn't hurt to go back and talk about some things Star Wars again. Because now that we've seen the sequel trilogy connection starting to come up, it's given me hope that maybe, just maybe, somehow the sequels will get some kind of an appreciation like the prequels have been getting for the last few years. Not a guarantee necessarily, but I think in a lot of ways it's starting to move in that direction. In time, we'll see what happens. So guys, those are my thoughts on Mandalorian Season 3. What are your guys' thoughts on the season? What's your favorite episode, favorite moment, favorite action sequence, or whatever it is, or if you didn't like the show? Either way, let's just try to keep it civil in the comment section, please, because any kind of civility goes a long way. Whatever your thoughts are, just comment below and tell me what they are. I'll see you guys in the next one.